Patrick Girard. I'll be handling the screen and Patrick will be handling the blackboard, more or less.
Greetings to our viewers online, if there are any. So there is Paribus logic.
Hi, Mom.
Here's a motivating example. If I say it comes from von Britt in 1963 in the treatise on preference logic. If I say I prefer my raincoat to my umbrella, here are two cases, and here's a way to represent it. An arrow going from left to right tells us that the state on the right, I guess on your right, is preferred. So we have two cases where, of course, if I have my raincoat and my boots, I prefer it to my umbrella. And if I have my raincoat and I don't have my boots, and I still prefer it to my umbrella. There's a defeating cases. If I have my umbrella and my boots, and I compare it with the case where I don't have my boots and my raincoat, then I would prefer the former. And saying Ceteris Paribus, everything being equals, is a way to rule out that comparison, to keep the preference working. And this is the main idea of the talk, to divide a space of possibilities into equivalence classes and keep the reasoning separate in each of those equivalence classes. And when we reason in preferences in various fields, such as, say, game theory, we can find some solution to problems in games where preferences are used. And for instance, the Nash equilibrium is one where we can see some sort of Ceteris Paribus reasoning taking place here, where we say that the other's strategy have to be kept constant. So here, if A keeps strategy AJ, then B prefers that middle spot, and likewise for B, if we keep that strategy constant, then A chooses the middle spot, and that creates a Nash equilibrium. In a more global setting, say in science, we can talk about conditional reasoning for rules. So, for instance, Bohr's law relates the pressure and the volume of gas, given that the temperature is taken constant. So, if we vary the temperature, then the law fails. But the idea is that we account for this by putting it into a Ceteris Paribus clause.
Okay, everyone get the basic idea? So it's my turn now. Right, so we're introducing this language. In fact, we're not introducing it, we're taking it over. It's a language for reasoning about Ceteris Paribus conditions in general. So we include inside the diamond of our modalities a set of formulas which is meant to represent those conditions that are held constant under Ceteris Paribus cases. So if you look at the truth condition, you see there's an extra clause there that requires the two states to be equivalent modulo gamma. And that just means that they have the same truth value for formulas in gamma. So you're going to say something about this?
So here's the example. We have the model here. How do we reason to find out the truth value of those formulas? So we have this Ceteris Paribus modality here. There's a condition P or Q that needs to be kept constant. There are two states in the model where it is true, this state, and this state is false. So we can divide it in this way. And here at the top we have P or Q, and at the bottom we don't have P or Q. Sorry, I'm not used to using this structure. But then we can use that information to figure out about this inside the modality, where if we keep P or Q constant, we obtain Q, and we have that it is true here, but false in both of those states, because here exactly it jumps across an equivalence classes. So the second modality divides it in that way.
So this is what Patrick has given you here, this picture, and you can see that the formula there is true just in the top right-hand node of the diagram. Okay, so this language has been studied, was introduced and studied by Van Bentum, Girard, and Roy. In what? Oh, yeah, okay, right. So, but only axiomatized for the finite case, which is relatively straightforward. All you need to do is to use reduction axioms, where you replace every formula systematically by a formula in the underlying base modal logic. So what we want to do is to look at the full logic, the full infinitary logic here. Problem is, it's not compact.
And we can see it by seeing that this entailment here is valid. To see it, we have the diamond with the empty set inside, which is just a good old Modal Logic diamond. So we have a state here where, with the empty set, we can see top, which just tells us that we have another state. Plus, we have that here, all the propositional variables are true. And then we have that each of those propositional variables have to be kept constant here as well. And now we have the intersection of our relation in the equivalence relation with respect to prop. If we had a finite set, that wouldn't work, because if we take this to be finite, there would be a remaining variable, and we could construct a counterexample by, say, putting p here and not p here, which would violate the equivalence.
Okay, I can't really see what he's doing, but I hope you're convinced anyway. So the consequence of this, of course, is that we can't get any strongly complete axiomatization for our logic. So we're going to look at, we don't know the solution about weak completeness, by the way. So what we're going to do at look is to look at various fragments where we can prove something interesting. Okay, but rather than look at the fragments directly, instead we're going to look at a separate language in which we forget about all these gammas altogether and just have parameters for the Ceteris Paribus conditions. Now we think this is kind of a useful language anyway for applications, because there's a sense in when you say Ceteris Paribus, you always remain somewhat indefinite about what those conditions really are. So we introduce parameters here, those are the little C's living inside the diamonds, instead of sets of formulas. And in our models we have these equivalence classes, which you've seen already being constructed in the first case from sets of formulas. You've got something to say about this, or no? Okay. Right, so there's an example of one of these models here. We have the equivalence classes drawn directly into the models. All right, so first result here, this is very easy to axiomatize this logic just from K together with this inclusion axiom which talks about the relationships between the modalities. Oh, I forgot to say that the conditions here are ordered, partially ordered. Okay, so how do we prove that completeness result? Well, for this we're going to use a third set of models, just basic Kripke models for the language here. So what I mean by that is we're interpreting our diamond C's by primitive binary accessibility relations RC rather than by equivalence relations. So we get models that look just like this, with the labels indicating those basic relations. And we'll have a systematic way of relating the Kripke models back to the parametric CP models. So in the first direction, if we take a Kripke model over here, we can use it to construct a parametric Kripke model simply by taking the underlying accessibility relation to be the union of those particular relations, and to take the equivalence classes to be the smallest equivalence classes that contain the RC relations.
So the way it works here, we have this model, and whenever we have worlds that are related in the C relation, and we'll keep them in the same equivalence classes, so those worlds, and then those two worlds here are related by D, and those two worlds here are related by D, they end up in two different equivalence classes. So this is how we go from the Kripke models to the parametric CP logic. Can we go back?
Well, no, there's a problem. Okay, so the obvious thing to do is to construct a Kripke model from the parametric model simply by defining RC to be the intersection of the accessibility relation with these equivalence classes. That's what's required for modal equivalence. But if we do that,
we end up in the problem when we have the when we took the union. We start here. We have this those two equivalence classes for C and for D. And the way to relabel the model would just be that whenever they're in the equivalence classes, you put C's. And it's not supposed to be. This is supposed to go this way. All right. So we have C, C, and this one is also in the equivalence classes. And then here we have D, and we have D.
Okay, so we have this extra C here. That's the problem that gets included when we go backwards. The solution to this, of course, is to unravel the model first. So we'll have an extra step in the construction. We start off with a Kripke model here. We unravel it, and then perform the construction of the parametric CP model, which ensures that those kind of problems don't occur. Okay, so that basically gives us our completeness result. You take a consistent set of formulas, you interpret it in the canonical model, you unravel, and then you construct an equivalent parametric model by the construction we just told you about. Okay, so now to build the link back to the original language, we have these parametric operators, parametric modal operators, and we want to associate each one of those ultimately with some set of formulas. So we're going to have this intermediate stage, which we call descriptions, where we have a function delta that maps our set of conditions here onto the power set of the set of formulas, and interpreted that over the over the parametric CP models here, but with the condition that the accessibility relations have to agree with the ones induced by the corresponding descriptions. So in the model that Patrick's been telling you about over here, we would have the description delta mapping C onto the condition P vel Q, and the mapping D onto the condition, or rather the set containing just the formula diamond C Q. Okay, so of course our original Ceteris Paribus logic here is just a special case of this, where we take C, the set of conditions, just to be the power set of the set of formulas in the original language.
Don't worry about cardinality.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Yeah. No, don't worry about that. Okay, so the ordering relation is just the subset ordering relation between the conditions, right? If you have a stronger condition, then it's a bigger set of formulas. And the delta function is just the identity function. Okay, so this is the general map of the approach then. We're going to start off with some Kripke models, we'll unravel them, we'll turn them into parametric CP models, and then we'll associate them with a certain description delta and use those to get these more language-like models at the end that we can use to interpret the original CP language. Problem. However, we can't do this all the time. Not all of these parametric CP models have a description.
If we had one in this case here, as we can see, those two states are not related by the C equivalence relation, which is just identity. If we could describe it, that would be a formula phi, which is true here, and false here. Those two states are symmetric or even bisimilar, so we just know we can't do that.
Okay, so we have to do something else. And so we're now going to introduce a technique to deal with this, which we call sprinkling. And the idea is we start off with an unraveled Kripke model, and we sprinkle around some new propositional variables in order to make the right distinctions that we need in the description model at the end. So what we're going to
think about it is if you give me two sparkles to sprinkle around, so Q and R, where do they come from?
Sparkles? Oh no, we'll get to that later.
Sprinkles.
Yeah, no, you can have the sprinkles for now.
So
I'll tell you how to get them later.
We'll come back later on to how we do it. So we start, say, with C. We start from the node. C is Q, so we put Q here. And then we just follow our accessibility relation and swap the value of the variables. So here, along D, it's not capped, so we go to not Q. Along C, it's capped, so we go again to not Q. And along C, it's capped, we go to not Q. Whereas here, it's an E step, not a C. So we move back to Q. And we then repeat with R for D. So we start with R. It's preserved along the D line, so we have R. And then it's not preserved here downward. It's not preserved here either. And here, along the D line, it is preserved. And this is how we sprinkle with sparkles.
So the sprinkling sparkles are the things that encode the relations that we have over here. Okay, so putting that back into the overall picture, we have this sprinkling operation. We're going to turn that into a parametric CP logic, just in the same way, CP model, just in the same way as we did before. And then the overall approach is that we need to then use the delta function to generate our Ceteris Paribus model at the end of the day. Okay, so this suggests the theorem that the Ceteris Paribus logic with descriptions, with a particular description delta, is going to be axiomatized as follows. First of all, we have the inclusion that we had in the first language. We'll need some other axioms, however, to ensure that the accessibility relations that we get preserve the right formulas. So we have these two preservation axioms here for formulas within the corresponding description set delta C. However, that doesn't quite work. We know it's not going to work because I told you at the beginning that the language is not compact. This technique won't allow us to prove a result of that kind. But we can do so for a certain part of the language, which we call the delta flexible part. So in terms of the completeness result, if we have a certain set of formulas that has a certain property, which we call delta flexibility, then we can use that in order to construct a model. And the way it works is, well, using the constructions I've talked about, the delta flexibility property will ensure, well, first of all, sorry, the delta flexibility will be required to ensure that the various stages of the construction go through correctly. So first of all, we need to ensure that in the original Kripke semantics, delta is respected, this condition delta is respected. And then we also need to show you how we can choose our sprinkles in order to sprinkle and get delta to be finally respected in the parametric CP model there. So this is the notion of a delta flexible set, slightly different than the one you've got in the abstract. This is a slightly weaker condition. We realized that we didn't need quite so strong a condition. The basic idea is that for a particular gamma here, we need to ensure that there are enough free propositional variables around in order to make the distinctions we need. So every description set must have one of these propositional variables. They must somehow track the order of the less than or equal to relation on conditions. But there can't be any of these sprinkles elsewhere. So I can't find them in any of the other conditions and none in the set gamma itself. And so here's an example of one of these delta flexible sets. If we have gamma here containing all of these various modalities, where they are ordered in this form here, so C1 is less than C2 and going on upwards, and D is incomparable with the rest, then we can, then this particular description set will be one that allows sprinkling. It's a flexible one. And you'll see that these P1s, P1, P2, P1, and so on, those satisfy those conditions. Each condition here has one of these sprinkles in it. It doesn't occur elsewhere and doesn't occur in gamma. And so using that, preservation will ensure that when we construct our canonical model, the delta relation is, the delta conditions are respected by the accessibility relation. We go through the process of unraveling and sprinkling. We can get the right sprinkles because delta is flexible, and we end up with a parametric CP model which satisfies the original set of formulas. Okay, so this suggests that there is a minor change we can make to the original language which will give us a full completeness result. So we call this flexible Ceteris Paribus logic, very similar to the original case, except that we have a one-way condition here instead. So each of the gammas here are interpreted by equivalence relations in the structure. I realize, sorry, that should be a double tilde there rather than a single tilde. They're all interpreted by equivalence relations in the structure, just as in the parametric case. And we require a one-way relationship between the equivalence relation in the structure and the preservation property across nodes in the structure. So essentially, the equivalence relation captures what's really going on, and the formulas in gamma give us sort of partial information about which conditions are being held constant while we reason using those modalities. Do you want to say something about this? Yeah.
Just that when we say Ceteris Paribus, in the case of Runvrit, we kept boots constant, and that was one obvious thing. And we might be able to list a few clauses that we want to keep constant when we do preferences, but then there's possibly infinitely many other conditions that we're not aware of, and this kind of captures this idea here.
So you can see that with this change of the semantics, our example of lack of compactness fails. So in this case here, the premises here are all satisfied. So we have all the propositional variables being true here and true here, but that's not sufficient to ensure that the diamond prop T holds at this node here, because we still don't know whether these are in the basic interpretation of the equivalence relation associated with gamma. So there's our final theorem then, that the flexible Ceteris Paribus logic is going to be axiomatized by inclusion and preservation. Thank you very much.